Hello, my name is Farah Lawal Harris. I'm YPT's artistic director, and I'm so happy to be joined by the lovely Thembi Duncan. Thembi,
Hey.
so good to see you. For those who don't know Thembi, Thembi used to be YPT's creative programs director. She was my supervisor and just a longtime friend and artist collaborator. And I'm so glad to be talking with you and also working with you again on Silence is Violence, Wish Me Well, our upcoming production at YPT. Just
Yay.
introduce yourself. Oh, let me take a deep breath. Would you like to introduce yourself to our audience for YPT's virtual stage, Thembi?
Yes, I would. Hi, it's Thembi. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a former YPT employee, have for many, many years been a YPT collaborator from an artistic perspective, and great friend of Farah, great admirer of Farah and her amazingness, and just grateful that I get to participate on this exciting project that combines two organizational um, missions and really speaks to some important issues that I'm sure we will get into soon.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Thembi. I receive all the kind
Yay!
words and I
Yay!
I beam them right back at you. Thembi was my predecessor. So while I was under Thembi's tutelage, she was training me to be artistic director of YPT. And it's the reason I felt so confident assuming this position because of the work and the mentorship that you gave me during that time. I've learned so much from you. And I look at the changes in YPT's productions over the years as a continuation of the vision that you already started, the vision that we were collaborating on together. Is just an extension of what you already began. You planted a lot of seeds,
Oh
and it's
wow!
nice to see
Thank you,
everything flourishing now. So, yeah, you
thank you,
were
Farah.
an indelible part of YPT's history, and I hope you know that.
I I received that and I appreciate that and I thank you. And the it's tricky sometimes when you're doing something and you have an idea. When I'm doing something and I have an idea in my mind, to have someone like you say, I see you, I see what you did, I appreciate what you did. It's very meaningful. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. So, for those who don't know, YPT has a performance series, a social justice performance series, as we've been calling it, called Silence is Violence, which we've been doing for the last 9 years. Can you believe that?
No, I can't, but 9 years is crazy.
9 years. And the way it started, it was an impromptu rapid response performance about police brutality. This was after the death of Michael Brown Jr. in Ferguson, Missouri, the birth of the Black Lives Matter movement, the killing of Freddie Gray in Baltimore. It was a very heated and racially charged time. And we were noticing at YPT that that time was entering into the classrooms and young people were discussing all these stories that were happening on the news, but there wasn't an avenue for those thoughts to be expressed because they were already writing their YPT plays about whatever they decided about, whatever they decided to write about. So as a staff, we came up with the idea of having some sort of rapid response curated open mic. And in that curated open mic, we had content from young people from our classrooms in school, as well as after school programs. And we also had content from professional artists, basically a lot of my friends who I called and said, hey, can you do this thing next week? In 2 weeks' time. And Thembi was one of those people. Thembi was in the original Silence is Violence, which was meant
It's
to be a
true.
one-time performance. This
It's true.
Yeah, it was at Capitol Hill Arts Workshop in Washington, DC, and it was such a beautiful tapestry of art and words from different perspectives about police brutality, about the dangers that we face as Black people and the other intersections that we have. And it was an opportunity for community to come together, arts community, people who appreciate art, to be able to see their thoughts and feelings expressed in a way that they might feel like, oh, I wouldn't have worded it that way, but that's exactly how I feel. Or, oh, wow, I never thought about how this impacts young people. It was just such a beautiful event that we continued it. And it continued over the years, exploring different themes, police brutality. We've explored immigration and xenophobia, Islamophobia, LGBTQ plus culture and pride, gentrification and environmental injustice, mothering while Black, and even, the future of American theater, after the racial awakening that happened after George Floyd's murder, we've explored all kinds of topics. And this year, we are exploring the topic of wellness from the perspective of formerly incarcerated people. And I particularly am interested in holistic wellness because I have been on a wellness journey. I was away from YPT for the majority of last year because I was in breast cancer treatment. And it was during that time that I had to face a lot of the ways that I was living and operating and how those were contributing to me being physically unwell and make a lot of shifts. And since I've come back with new eyes and with a new energy and seeing how much that transformed my life and helped heal me from cancer. I was particularly interested in talking about that with folks who have dealt with traumas on their bodies in different ways from being incarcerated. So, what we did for this performance is we commissioned 7 young playwrights in their 20s, 6 of them who are YPT alumni from various points of participation, to interview 5 formerly incarcerated people who participate as community advocates through an organization called Voices Unbarred. Voices Unbarred is our community partner, and they do justice work, theater work in prisons and outside of prisons to empower and tell the stories of people who are going through the justice system and to raise awareness. So I said a mouthful, but that's what this performance is. And Thembi is our director. And this show is in rehearsals right now. I got a peek of rehearsal last night and it was amazing. I did not want to leave. So, how is this process going, and what brought you back to YPT? What was it about this production that made you say yes?
I mean, I'm gonna be real. Anything you had asked me, I was gonna say yes. But this particular production is significant because of all the reasons you talked about with regards to rapid response. A lot of time, artistry takes a year, 2 years, several years to create, to reflect on sort of a kind of static aspect of the human condition or theoretical aspects of the human condition. But to be artists and be able to respond to something in real time, so, in the age of information, in the age of social media, and in the 24-hour news cycle, is really important. And I think it was important that you created a platform for young people to be able to express themselves about things that are pressing right now. So to me, to be able to be a part of a an exploration of wellness and healing through reentry and through the complications of the justice system was really powerful to me. And having been personally touched by the system in so many ways, as many of us have been, of course I had my own perspectives, but I also wanted to, as we live and grow and continue to study, we get better at our craft. So I wanted to understand how the director me at this age that I am now tells a story, or shapes a story, versus 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. So it's a combination of wanting to participate in the storytelling about this important process, but also wanting to shape myself and continue my own learning and development in my craft. So those two things came together, and it just, I had to do it.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. You saying that brought up a memory of how, fun fact, Thembi and I went to college together
We
briefly.
did. We
Yeah, we
did.
were in University of Maryland College Park's theater program together.
And we were
And
in a show together.
we did a show
Remember?
together and we took a class together
We did.
with a guest artist who taught that class, Miss Rhodessa Jones, who does theater for incarcerated women. And through that class, we had the opportunity to work with young women who are in a juvenile detention facility in Laurel, Maryland, and do theater with them and read books with them and create art with them. And you mentioned just how you've had experiences over the years with incarceration and how you were wondering how you would view it now. What's changed for you from that time when we worked with the young women at Waxter, or young ladies at Waxter, to now?
That is a phenomenal question. I call back to that time as a point of departure for a lot of the work that I do now, all the time. All the time. That time spent with Rodessa, that time spent around young girls who had, in some cases, committed very intense crimes, but our focus was never on what they did to be incarcerated. Our focus was always on them as human beings, who they were, what they could create, the stories that they had to tell. And that, for me, it's one thing, again, going back to what I said about theoretical versus really being in the work. It's one thing to think, well, yes, of course everyone deserves to be heard and everyone deserves empathy. It's another thing to actively create with people and having to have empathy, and then accepting their empathy for us. They're not, it's not just a one-way street, and it's not transactional. And that's something I learned from that experience as well, that it wasn't about being transactional, of placing myself as a person who's not in the criminal justice system, like, oh, I'm better than you, or I made better choices, because I'm one I'm one choice away. I can step right out right now and I can end up in the criminal justice system. I don't act like, oh, this could never happen to me. And being able to see myself in those girls and see it, talk to them and learn decisions they made. I made some similar decisions when I was a young girl, so it's no different. It's just that they ended up, going a little further, getting caught. So, and at the time, there was just so much learning and understanding that I developed. If I fast forward to now and what I've learned and understood since then, it's just been that everybody deserves empathy no matter what. And everybody deserves forgiveness and understanding. To me, that is how I have come to live in this stage in my life. That, I'm double nickels this year. No, that's not double nickel, double quarters, 50, half. So I can't even count. See, that's what happens when you turn 50. You can't count anymore. 50, right? This is my 50 year. So the the things that I felt like, that's not right. This can't happen, that can't happen. I had that mentality back then. I don't have that now, because I've lived enough life where I'm like, anything could happen. Any of us is capable of anything. And while I'm not saying I'm okay with certain things and I'm gonna ride with you and be like, yay, good job, I also have really come back from a place of judgment, right? The more I continue being a lifelong learner, the more I just I'm like Bruce Lee said, I'm just like water. I let the things flow as they are, right? And I don't worry about me deciding that I'm on a certain side of things and you're not. It's more about, I have a curiosity about humanity, and I want to understand who you are as a human being, whether or not I agree with you, whether or not you and I can be friends, whether or not we're going to have drinks together or spend time together. We're human. So let's find that common connection. So that's what I've learned since then. And that's what I want to put back into the process, right? That it's not about judgment. It's about what are those connections of humanity that we can find with anybody.
Mm, that spoke to my soul on so many
Yeah.
levels. Yeah, I'm
It's
reaching that
hard.
it
It's hard.
is. And even just the changes that occur as we grow wiser, as we spend more time on this earth. I'm ending a decade too. I'm ending my 30s this year, and I feel there's been such a shift in how I exist in this world and the things I used to worry about versus what I don't even consider anymore.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful. It
Mm-mm.
also, were you about to say something?
No, no, that was it.
Yeah, and it also made me think of just the beauty of theater, the building of empathy, how important it is to hear people's stories that aren't people who you are used to. And it doesn't mean that you have to be persuaded to be different from when you left, but just to consider, and to
Yeah.
consider in a way that's artful and doesn't have to be a debate, or uncomfortable conversation. Or I mean, theater can be an uncomfortable conversation, but it's a personal experience. And I'm hoping that that's just been my hope throughout Silence is Violence, is the building of empathy for people who are dealing with whatever that topic is that we've chosen for that iteration. And it's so amazing to me, the intergenerational conversation that is happening in this particular production. We've always had a fusing of generations. One aspect of Silence is Violence is that we've always had young people as well as adults coming together to speak about one topic. And I think it's so important for us to talk to people who have different experiences and to hear a multitude of experiences at one time versus just one person's perspective or one generation's perspective. And having young people write about people who, for the most part, can be as old as their parents is different. And what they attached to from those interviews was surprising to me. The things that stood out that I'm like, oh, if I was a playwright on this, I would write about that. We're not in the
Mm-hmm.
script. And
Mhm.
certain things that I just thought of like, okay, that was interesting. They really latched onto. And I'm wondering for you, were there any surprises when you first read the script about what our young people came up with?
The reflection, the depth of reflection, the poetic approach to observing the world around oneself, the the understanding of other human beings and their situations, those are all things that were particularly surprising to me. And I guess they shouldn't have been, because I should have expected it, but that's the work that we're always doing. That's the work that I'm always doing, is how to expect more from people and to not be like, "Oh, wow, look how well you did that." It's like, "Well, why not? Why not?" They've been doing this incredible work with you. They've been establishing themselves as playwrights. They're doing the work. So yeah, they would be asking these sort of probing questions of life, of the universe. The way that they have taken these stories and created a analogies and created a way to see people that's differently than just the surface, I think are all interesting things that I discovered in the listening to the interviews, hearing what they pulled out, but also just the writing itself, because I saw the writing before I saw the interviews. So I was able to just come to it with a clean heart, clean mind. And they were just beautiful. I remember just reading and being like, this is incredible, very poetic, which inspired me as a director to think about, okay, theater is not theater is not something you should read or listen to. It's something you experience. You're there. There's so many things happening at once, and so it was important to me as a director to make sure that we bring their text off the page and bring it alive in a way that you can only experience it if you're in that room. Otherwise, it's like, well, you could just read it to me, or I could read it myself, right? So
Mhm.
that was the inspiration. Really got me bubbling about, okay, how can we bring these words alive in a way that is still respectful to the playwright's vision and respectful to the human being whose story it's based on, but adds more artistry of myself, the assistant director Jeremy Hunter, and all the all of the collaborators. You talked about how beautiful theater is. I second that, because theater is the only art form that I know of where so many collaborators engage. And whereas in film, which has a lot of collaborators, television has a lot of collaborators, there's a box like what we have here, and someone decides what's inside that box, and whatever's inside that box is all you see. You can't look anywhere outside of that box. Whereas in theater, you decide what you see. So we're giving you a whole tapestry, but if I'm looking over here and Farah, you're sitting next to me and you're looking that way, we're seeing two different things. And that's why I love theater, because you have to be so like 360 degrees in it in every moment. And we can do this show 50 times in a row. No two shows are going to be alike. It's it's the only real in real time happenstance where human beings can share the human experience. That's why I love theater. So those are all the connections for me.
That's beautiful. Yeah,
Thank you.
it makes it special. Last night I had dinner with some collaborators that we're going to be working with next season, and one of them asked why theater. And for me, it was that human experience, being sharing breath with one another and being able to witness stories right before your eyes without the buffer of a screen, and that's part of being human. And as we move forward with technology, we get further and further away from that. And then we dealt with a global pandemic where we had to actually stay 6 feet away from each other. So that human connection has been drifting away throughout the years, but it's been such a joy for me to re-engage with theater and see just, oh, it's all about the experience. It's not just the play. It's the experience of being in the lobby. It's the experience of looking in the audience and seeing how that person who looks completely different from me is responding to something that's just magical, or to connect eyes with somebody, or to be moved by something and hear someone of a similar experience also chuckle at that and be like, oh, it's not just me, is a
Hmm.
wonderful thing. I think it makes us feel less alone. There's something about that.
Yeah, can I just, I would love to say something to that, if I
Yeah.
might. You talked about it's the whole thing, it's being in the lobby, it's catching eyes with people. You made me think about the reality that for Black people in the United States of America, because that is my primary experience in theater, it is not always safe. You don't always have a warm welcome. I have been in many a lobby as a professional theater practitioner who may have something to do with what's going on inside the doors of the theater. Walked in a lobby and had people treat me like I didn't belong just because they didn't know yet who I was. And then once they knew who I was, they shifted how they treated me, even though 5 minutes ago I was the same person. Right. And the way that people
Mhm.
decide for themselves who belongs in theater, who belongs in theater spaces, I want to make sure that it's clear for anybody who's seeing this and doesn't know YPT that Farah always, always, always has created a safe space for everyone to come in and an inclusive space so that when we're talking about these very complicated issues, everybody coming into the space is given an opportunity to take up space. And at the same time, Farah has always been good about if you're taking up too much space, she gonna call you out on it and be like, "So you're taking up too much space. I need to make sure everybody has an opportunity to take up space," and amplifying voices of those who don't necessarily feel as confident or have the agency to speak for themselves. So I just wanted to speak on that because I think it's so important that a lot of people create theater, but not most theater creators don't aren't mindful towards the fact that inclusive spaces mean you have to be actively promising and delivering on creating safety for everyone who enters the space. And you do that, Farah. So thank you. And that's what people will experience when they come see Silence is Violence.
I received
Just
that.
saying.
Thank you, Thembi. Thank
Of
you.
course.
Yeah, it made me think about why I am that way about theater and the experience of people who are non-theater goers because my favorite people are the non-theater audience because that's that's the people. You know, the
Mm-hmm.
artists, we're the collaborators, we're the small folks. But like, imagine Beyonce just sat in a rehearsal room with her background singers and dancers, and we never got to see the show. That's not
Yeah. Yeah.
interesting. You
Right.
know, it's like
Right.
it's preaching to the choir. But for me, the real people are not the people who are trying to reach with these stories, I should say, are outside of that. And I know what it's like to be on the outside and be other. One of my first theater experiences that I distinctly remember was when I believe I was in the 6th grade and I was in an after school program called Teen Club, and we used to go on different field trips. And we went to the Kennedy Center on a Saturday to watch a play about Harriet Tubman. I don't even recall if it was a musical, but what I do recall is exactly what I was wearing that day because I was so underdressed. I, you know, came from
Oh.
a family that was lower income. My dad was a DC cab driver. I didn't know I was supposed to dress up for this thing at the Kennedy Center. It was my first time going. So imagine I'm wearing this green flannel shirt and light, washed jeans and sneakers. And I show up and my classmates are all wearing stockings and patent leather shoes and velvet. And I'm just like,
Mm.
oh my God, looking around this big place and feeling like, what am I doing here? Sitting in that audience and not knowing, oh, I'm not supposed to pull out crackers out of my bag to snack on because I'm hungry. And everyone just, I know what it felt like. I felt so small in that experience. I don't want anyone to ever have that experience in theater, feeling small or feeling like I don't belong here. Everybody belongs in theater as far as being able to hear stories. We all have stories to tell and we all benefit from hearing stories. Stories are life. That's how we get
Mm.
by. Even we talk about things that we believe. Those beliefs are based off of stories, whether they're religious beliefs, whether they're family beliefs, they're all rooted in story. And Silence is Violence has told so many stories over the years. Like I have not counted how many writers we've worked with. That has to be at least 100 of the stories that have been represented. It's more than that.
Easily.
Like, yeah,
Easily.
easily. Yeah, just the number of young people who we've worked with over the years. And it's making me think about the stories in this particular piece, Silence is Violence, Wish Me Well, where we worked with 5 community advocates. They were all different in their experiences and their personalities and their expressions. But I wonder which is there a particular story that stuck? Ugh. I wonder if there is a particular story that stands out to you in this piece.
Yes, there. One of our collaborators is a chef, and he talks about the peace and the motivation and the connection and the healing of listening to knives and forks on a plate. And the reason why I think that's so interesting is because I have a very dear friend who has, I don't remember what the name of it is, but there's this thing that where like you can't hear certain sounds without being like physically affected. It's just like it harms you to hear like scrapey sounds or and she's just like she just can't listen to it. It's bothersome to her, right? And a lot of people feel like, oh, nails on a chalkboard, fork on a plate is an annoying sound. So to hear somebody talk about how it's the opposite for him, that it's soothing, was interesting to me. And listening more to him, understanding that, of course, it's not about the sound itself, but it's about what the sound means. It means that he's created a meal for his family or people who he cares about or people who admire him, and that he was able to put love in that meal and people are eating it and they're not talking because it's so good. And, all of the beauty of storytelling and how you can say something and all around that can be so much extra meaning that is pulled out from our experience. I think that really stood out to me because that's to me the essence of theater, that all of us can have a theatrical experience and then come out of it with so many different impressions just based on our own experiences and lives and be able to connect through those different threads. So that really stood out to me, his just very simple joy of cooking and sharing food and breaking bread and bre- the sound of breaking bread being of pleasure to him.
Mhm. That one stood out to me as well.
Yeah, I'll say also, Farah, water just seemed to be a very uh everybody pretty much to the person. I might be missing one, but I feel like every single piece has water in it in some way. And just that idea of what water represents and the different ways that it shows up and the idea of one of our collaborators saying, I feel like I was a fish in a past life. I think I was a fish was so interesting. And a lot of the writers just really picked up on that. It's such a fascinating pondering in life.
Absolutely. The water surprised me as well. So just to give you all a clue into what this artistic process was, we YPT commissioned these 7 young playwrights and said, "Hey, are you interested in this project? If you are, we are interviewing these community advocates on these days. Confirm that you can make it." And we had these interviews in Zoom where it was our young playwrights with Voices Unbarred, with the artistic director Lori Pitts, as well as the community advocates on the days that they were actually available. And it was a conversation that I facilitated where I had a list of prepared questions, but the playwrights also were able to ask questions. And one of the things that stood out that one of the community advocates said to me afterward is that they were surprised that we didn't ask any questions about their time being incarcerated.
Hmm.
That we were asking just about things like, if you could speak to your younger self, what would you say? Who is God to you? Like, just how do you maintain your wellness? What do you do to take care of yourself? Who do you consider family? What is love? Like, just these big
Mm-hmm.
philosophical type questions. And it is so funny that water was such a theme because when I think of water, I think of flow and I think of movement and freedom, which is the opposite of incarceration. And I'm just so curious to see what all this is going to look like on stage. And I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk about your director's concept or what your thoughts are for how this performance will be executed and what the experience of an audience member will be.
Sure. I started off how I typically will start off with productions. And what's interesting is my process typically is to show up. Well, let me back before I show up. Is to read the piece and to bring whatever it is that I know and understand about whatever the piece speaks to. Do a little research, read it again, try to understand what's being said. Um, how can this be theatrical? How does it come off the page? And then I find my way. I'm patient with the process. I just let it come, and I find my way to some ideas. And usually on the first day of rehearsal, I'll show up with two visual art images. Often one will be classical, and then one will be contemporary. That's just, a process. And I'll say this is not so much the aesthetic of the piece. This is just a little window into my mind of how I see the story, being told. And then I talk about I'll pull from the text and talk about what I see, what I hear, what I think the piece needs to look like on its feet. And in the past couple of productions and projects I've directed, I found that hasn't been sufficient for me. So using the technology that is available to us, I now tend to use AI in creating things, because now it's like I don't have to find something that speaks to it. I literally can create something that speaks much more directly to what I'm doing. And so with the questions, as an aside, with the questions of like artistic property, right, intellectual property and AI and those very complicated conversations, I feel comfortable using this in this process because I'm not creating something to be sold or to be, featured really outside of that room. It's really just a communication tool. So I offer that to people who are creative to not feel bad about that, because I'm not selling somebody else's images, but I am using finding my way to a more exact expression, right? And since I can't sketch or draw it in that detail, then I feed it into a chat box. But okay. So I created this video just with a soundscape and some images of what I felt the piece said to me. And it was people in water. So it just had I had like a heartbeat and water sounds. I found sounds of like what it might be like in the womb. That's what I was envisioning, that when you see this piece, it's like being in the womb, that you're surrounded and immersed, and it's this life-giving thing that's happening around you. And so that's where I started. But what's interesting is a lot of times when you start somewhere, it doesn't mean you don't go somewhere else. And I'm a very open collaborator. So I started there. And then when we started to really read the pieces and the actors started to channel the different characters, then I started to see a broader vision. So allowed that to come out. And so what people will see with this piece is we're not going to lose the poetry of the text. We're going to emphasize that because that's important, right? The storytelling itself and the content of the story is important, but the way that the stories are being told is also important. So we want to make sure that we isolate that language in ways that include voiceover, that include, sort of echoing back and forth. There are ways that we're keeping the integrity of the language, but also highlighting the beauty of the language itself for the audience, but also this piece is going to have a robust soundscape. It has to. It has to. So that's something we were thinking about where, sometimes it's just about things happen, musical transition, sound effects if needed. But in this case, there's a much more ambient soundscape. There's a much more of a sense of a kind of ethereal energy that hopefully will give us a feeling of floating. That's what I'm going for, right? You talked about flow, you talked about the water. I want us to feel that in the space as much as possible.
I'm so excited.
Yay!
I'm so excited. It's such a treat to have you back. You're such a phenomenal director and artist, and I can't wait to see your vision fully realized. How have rehearsals been going?
They're great. Do you want me to talk about how we've been doing them?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
If so,
Like
because Cody could use it or not use it. I'm taking some water real quick.
Okay, no problem. So I am in Buffalo, and everyone else collaborating is in DC. And I have been on Zoom directing, which I love. I'm a remote person. Like I do a lot of remote projects. It's been great because it's one of those ways where like we're not allowing distance and geography to keep us from collaborating. And so Jeremy Hunter, who's great, is the assistant director. So he's in the room and we are collaborating on all of the pieces. There are 13 different pieces. Some of them are fairly short and some of them are pretty lengthy. I would say that, when it all shakes out, they range probably between 4 or 5 minutes to like 15, 20 minutes or so, depending on like how we're still shaping them, but that's roughly it. And what's interesting is between Jeremy and myself, But I like Jeremy because he's not like, there's a lot of ways to be an assistant director. And I've been an assistant director for folks where all I did was take notes. That's it. Take notes or support the director in what they're doing. But in this case, my style, my sort of leadership style or teaching style is, how far do you want to go? What do you want out of this process? And so for Jeremy's actually taking the lead on a few of the pieces so that he has an opportunity to get in, to dig in. So it's not just me doing everything and Jeremy's just watching, because Jeremy's building himself, his reputation and his skills as a director. So we're both able to engage and have conversation about that. And so, and he's very good about, okay, what do you think about this? How's this looking? And I'm giving him feedback on his work. So that's been great. And then the rest of the pieces I'm directing, and the actors are so collaborative and so kind and generous with themselves, with their vulnerability, with what they bring to the process, that you're going to see a lot of physical movement. You're going to see a lot of internal reflection. They're very insightful when we talk about the pieces and how they make connections. We had the beautiful gift, thank you, Farah, of an extended rehearsal period, which is my dream. And I mean, if we want to go back to 2020 and how we talked about in the theater community, we were going to stop 10 out of 12s, and we were going to make sure that actors had enough breaks, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of folks didn't do that, just saying. But Farah, as always, follows through when she says, we need to do better. She will do things. And so she gave us more rehearsal time. So what it allowed us to do was have more table work time, which is always a problem. We never get to do enough table work to really dig into the text. So we did that. And so as a result, the actors were able to make such deep, meaningful connections to the text that when we started to get things on their feet, everything was just natural. It just came. And so we're shaping it really beautifully, and the actors are having really meaningful relationships with the piece, which is important to me. I don't do hack work. I don't like when people are just like, I'm on a gig, I'm doing the lines, I learn the lines, I perform, put the costume on and go, all right, and just rinse, repeat. That is not why we are here on this earth, So we really got to spend time with the text, and that, I think, is going to make this a really special experience for anyone who chooses to join us.
Wonderful. Well,
Sorry,
with the theme being wellness, I'm curious. Oh, that's okay. You need a sip?
My nose running. No, my nose is running. I had to.
Oh, that's okay.
It just runs randomly. It doesn't care. The
allergies. With the theme of the show being wellness, I'm curious, what's one wellness practice that you have? What is something that you do to keep yourself well?
Oh, let me tell you something about wellness. When I left YPT, you gave me a card. It was like a little square card. And it said, I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember the exact words, but it said, your destiny depends on your will. It was like something along those lines, right? Of like, it's up to you to decide your destiny. It's up to you to decide how far you're going to go. But it's your will, it's your tenacity that's going to get you there. And that was always so meaningful to me, because I was like, yes, Farah, that's it. And that's what I sort of pushed on to my next project with. And I think about that all the time. And I think about how important it is that we have ebbs and flows in our lives where we make a decision to really commit to something and put all of ourselves into it. But those little things, those little voices in the back of our heads are saying, hey, you need to slow down. Hey, you're doing a lot. Like, this is not healthy. This is too much. You need to spend time for yourself. For me, self-care has been two things. One is leave the United States. That was like, under whatever circumstances you can figure out, I had to get away to find myself. I know it sounds like some eat, pray, love stuff, but it's true. I was in grad school, so it wasn't like I wasn't doing anything. Like, that was whatever, is how we do this, right? I was like, well, I'm not actually fully resting because I'm still doing something productive. So, you can weigh that or judge that how you please. But for me, it was just leaving, being able to be in a different environment and giving myself a different perspective, just even being seen as an American versus always seen as a Black woman, which is an experience that I think is really important for Black women to have. It's like, that has its ups and downs. I'm not saying it's great, but just being seen as something else other than which people always treat you as your whole life, and realizing, oh, I have my identity that I've constructed, and then other people construct identities around me that may or may not align with how I feel about myself, and being able to step back into the United States with a renewed sense of vigor and calm. People, I just saw somebody yesterday who said, you look like you're at peace. And I said, thank you. I received that because I am. So I knew for me it was going away. So I would say for anyone, obviously not just Black women, but specifically because that's what I am and that's who I'm talking to, that we as honestly who get treated like the workhorses of humanity deserve to take ourselves out of toxic environments and put ourselves in places where we get to get gone for a little bit, and nobody is asking us for anything, and nobody's expecting us to save them or help them or serve them, right? And then being able to step back in under our own terms. That's my one way of self-care. Another way is reading a book for a reason other than research or, knowledge, I guess, which is really hard for me. Like literally reading a memoir, a novel, you know, a graphic novel, which I love. That's, I have to talk myself into these things because I say, oh, well, this serves that purpose. I'm going to just let that ride. At least I'm doing it. So that's my other form of self care. The idea of structuring time to do something that's like, it's okay that this isn't being monetized. It's okay that this isn't productivity. It's still a journey. What about you?
Yes, I love that.
Thank you.
For
This is
me,
hard.
it is.
Mm-hmm.
Kundalini yoga is my favorite self-care. Kundalini yoga is the yoga of awareness. So it's more of like a restorative yoga form. It's not about how flexible one can become or how good you are at the poses. It was so important for me as someone who leans toward perfectionism to have something that I don't have to be good at, that it's a practice based on how you're feeling that day, and how your body feels that day determines how far you go with the stretches. And there are all sorts of modifications one could make, and it involves breath and affirmations and prayer. It's a spiritual experience, and I love it so much. And I do it every day. Before I wake up out of the bed, as soon as I wake up, I'm stretching and getting in touch with my body. And it's funny because when we were studying acting in college, that phrase was always thrown at us: get in your body, be in your body, be in your body. And I didn't recognize how much my body was being controlled by trauma and anxiety and stress until those layers start to get peeled away. And then you realize, like, oh, my hip has been hurting because of this one experience that happened in college. And Kundalini, there's a concept of Kundalini awakening where you get big realizations. It's a spiritual experience where things are revealed to you while you're practicing. So realizing, like, oh, the reasons I have carpal tunnel is because I'm trying to grip and control everything in my life. And when I let that urge to control go away, guess what? The tension melts away. So just that level of awareness has been so good for me and so calming, and has really changed my nervous system and how I respond to stressors in life. It builds a strong nervous system. It helps do lymphatic drainage. So when I had breast cancer and when I had surgery, there was no more cancer in my lymph nodes. And I credit Kundalini Yoga for that, for actually manually helping me drain my own lymph nodes and for freeing me from having to go to the chiropractor and physical therapy to manage chronic pain. I don't even have chronic pain barely anymore because of yoga. So that's my favorite wellness practice.
Wow.
Yeah, I love it. Others that I do: drinking a gallon of water per day. Uh, Gratitude. I have a gratitude jar next to my bed. And since January 1st, every night I write things down right before I lay down. I reflect on my day and write down what I'm grateful for and throw it in the jar.
Mm.
And it's beautiful because if I have a day where I'm down, I could just pull something out and remember what to be grateful for. It's like, look at all these blessings. It's only June and I could barely fit any more papers into this mason jar. It's like, I think I need a bigger jar. So gratitude has been a huge practice for me as well. But wellness for me is definitely holistic. It's listening to my body. It's acknowledging when I'm tired. It's saying, hey, I know I said I was going to be able to do that thing, but if I push myself to commit to that, I won't be well. And I'm unwilling to sacrifice my wellness for anything or anyone anymore, which is so
Mm.
contrary to like the concept of theater and how theater is produced, where the
Mm-hmm.
idea, at least with some productions I've been in, is, well, everyone's unwell. We're all tired, where it creates an atmosphere where it's okay to disrespect each other openly or be snippy with each other. And I'm aware that that's not the type of space that's well for me. And I'm making YPT the type of theater that is well for artists, that's well for artists. It's kind of the anti-theater, you know what I mean? It's
Ah.
performance, but done in a way that is not the common method of doing things, like what you mentioned with the expanded rehearsal process. Or artists often mention like the artist handbook that we give and all of our policies about non-retaliation, things that usually would only extend to staff, extend to contracted artists as well. That they can't be fired if they make a complaint about racial injustice or sexual harassment. More industries need things like that, or
Yes.
not having rehearsals 5 nights a week, because I know as a parent artist, I can't be gone 5 nights a week. That's too much of a burden on my husband. So expecting actors to, just give everything up, it's tough. Yeah, we're open to families and to people's lives, and to the fact that people as freelancers often have to work on more than one project at a time, which is why we don't have rehearsals on the weekends for this production, why it's just Tuesday through Thursday. So people can take care of their other obligations, but still create the art. And the art doesn't suffer. To me, the art is better when folks are relaxed and feel heard and seen and are not exhausted by the time they reach tech time, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, Tech Week is in our field known as a time when, like you said, people get snippy, people are upset, there's an argument, people are not bringing their best selves to the process. And in conversations in our field, people are always saying, well, that's not a good thing, that's not healthy. Okay, but what are you going to do about it? There's this weird lack of accountability and learned helplessness that I think people can fall into, where it doesn't even, I shouldn't say it doesn't occur to them, but they choose not to actually do something about it. So I appreciate that you do things about, when you see something's not right, you say, okay, I'm in a position where I can do something about it, so I will. And I am inspired by that. And I know that others are inspired by that. So I think it's important that we continue this process, like that I take things away from my experience in this process on my next project and talk about what you did to make the process better for us, and talk about things that I'm going to do as a director to make the process better, knowing that you only have control over what you have control over. And if people are accustomed to a certain way of doing things and they don't feel like they want to shift in that, then so be it. But it really does make a difference, and I'm grateful to be a part of something that's making a difference. And I love the idea of wellness, and you using that as the inspiration for this piece. I also just want to say, Farah, that going back to the questions you asked the collaborators about wellness and their connect, like that's led us to the pieces that we have. So that's an important thing I think people need to know about artistic collaboration, is that the spark, the beginning, the foundation of the project came from this beautiful, holistic, culturally sensitive, thoughtful place. The pieces couldn't have been anything but transformative coming from that, and they're very unified. They have like, it's almost as if all the writers were sitting in the same room at the same time, and they weren't.
Mm-mm.
I don't even know. Like, I don't think some of them know each other, right? But
Only three of them know each other.
see, that's
Yeah.
what, like, from all over. So the fact that the pieces, as folks will see, are so unified and connected is it really speaks a lot to how thoughtful you were in starting off this process, and how important it is when you're curating work to come from that kind of foundation. Because you see where pieces, you're like, I can't figure out why this piece isn't working. It's like sometimes you have to go all the way back to the source. Where did this even begin? And that
Mm-hmm.
can give you the answers to, okay, how can we reshape this to make it more meaningful and safe for all the collaborators?
Mm-hmm. It excites me that we have young people working on this production as well. We have two Howard University theater students involved with the production, our stage manager, Tyree, as well as one of our ensemble members, Prince. And the fact that they're getting to work professionally and in this sort of process, I hope impacts them in a way where they know what it is to be mistreated and they don't accept less than because they know what it is to be honored as an artist. And it's not just about, oh, you're young, this is just how it is, just learn the ropes that they can know from them from this process that okay, it doesn't have to be created in that way. I'm hoping that this is empowering for them. And it feels good to be contributing to the creative economy and to the next generation of theater makers as part of YPT's strategic plan to be part of the career advancement of young people in theater. And I thank you for being willing to work with these young folks. And I know that they're learning so much from you and from Jeremy and all the other artists in the room. So I have one last question for you.
Of course.
If someone were to ask you, why should I come to this show? What would your answer be?
Come to this show. You should come to this show because it's only very rarely that you get a chance to sit in a room and experience the stories of people and reentry in such a magical theatrical way. And I think that this is a part of a broader movement where everyone, no matter where they are in life, no matter what their life circumstances are, have a chance for their stories to be told. And I think it's important for all of us to be a part of this movement. So that's why you should come, not just to experience incredible art, because it's going to be incredible. YPT always does incredible art. We know that. But to think about being a part of a movement where everyone's story is told and everyone's value is celebrated with the highest of effort and consideration and thought.
Thank you.
Thank
She said
you.
it. She said it. So if you are interested in this performance, it'll be taking place on June 21st and 22nd at Prince George's Community College Performing Arts Center. You can get tickets at yptdc.org. I also encourage you to go on our website. We have all of the artists on there. There's going to be more content through our virtual theater to give you a peek into this process and what's going on with the show. And if you can't make those dates, it will be on the virtual theater after the run. It's an in-person performance, and we will also be live streaming, so there's no excuse for you to not watch it. Thank you so much for your time, Thembi. I'm so grateful for you and all that you are, all that you are. And I'm so thankful that my first big production I'm producing since I've been back is with you. It's just,
Yay.
it's full circle. I love it. Yeah, so
It's
thank
it's
you.
it's it's the way it was supposed to happen, right? Like I feel like it's the way it was supposed to happen. I love you. I will always be there for you, and whatever you ask me to do, the answer is yes in advance. So,
I love you too.
of
Thank you, Thembi. Thank you
course.
all. And we'll be coming to you again soon with more content on this virtual theater.